So let's say welcome to Gary and also Carol. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Can you hear me? The back here. This is our second time in Birmingham. Since we published this book, which we published ourselves, we didn't go through a publisher because the material we felt had to be in our hands and not in other people's. So we didn't want to give our power away to publishers who can pulp your book if it doesn't sell in a year's time. So the first talk we gave was in Aston Church last year, and we was amazed to see how many people turned up. We was amazed how many people in Birmingham are interested in their history and mystery, because there's a lot of mystery to Birmingham, believe it or not. And we started a journey up the country from the Isle of Wight, following an ancient alignment. I started this back in 1993, and I discovered that the St Michael line has a north-south equivalent, and they call it the Bellinus line. And it's a line of sites, so it's, if you like, it's a projected line on a map with lots of sites that go through it. So I'm going to talk about some of the sites, because there are many, many lines, and people, what are they lines? You know, do they have power? Are they just imaginary lines on a map, and coincidental places just happen to fall on it? But you'll see there's a bit of a mystery to this. I'm on your way now, aren't I? I'll move up here. Okay. So, what I discovered that this line from the Isle of Wight, I think I'll stand over there. It'll be safer over there. So this incredible line connects all these ancient places in Britain, which includes Winchester, the ancient capital of England under the Saxon and Norman kings. Birmingham, as we mentioned before, which I'm going to mention more about, that it was the first manufacturing capital in the world, but not an ancient site as such. But we'll go into that later. Manchester was one of the greatest textile places in the world. Carlisle was the ancient capital of the north, and Dunfermline was the ancient capital of Scotland before Edinburgh. So it's a line of important sites, both modern and ancient. So we began to think, is it a coincidence that Birmingham and Manchester fall upon this route? Now this route also projects along the longest land route north-south through Britain, avoiding the sea and the estuaries. Apart from this place here, on the Forth, where it crosses at a fording place, now the Forth Bridge runs across that point. So in ancient times that was a fording place. So it could have been a road linking the longest land route north-south. And in comparison, the Michael line, which I'll show you, I'll talk a little bit about later, was the longest line east-west through Britain without passing through any estuaries or the sea. So this line seems to complement the Michael line. And I'll talk a bit about the Michael line. Has any of you heard of the Michael line? No? Anybody? One? Two? A couple of people? Right, okay. So this line that complements the Michael line was first discovered by Guy Phillips back in 1976, when, after he was drawing lines on a map through the Midlands and Brigantia, he came across this line, which he felt was a kind of axis line through Britain. He didn't really do much research on it, other than to say it seems to be a spinal route through the country. So I sort of experimented on maps and projected out, and then eventually used computer programs like Google Earth to allow for the curvature of the Earth. And I was amazed what I found was on this line. I'll go back because, first of all, some of the ancient beacon hills were on this line, such as St Catherine's Hill in Winchester, which is rather like St Michael's Mount on the Michael line. It's a known place of power. And lots of dowsers have found that it seems to be these hills are rather like telluric places of energy, where lots of lines seem to join. And lots of occult history as well, where people have regularly gone there over the centuries, either to practice paganism or witchcraft. And we found this at Meon Hill, which is an ancient British word for middle. The Meon Hill was a middle hill of then the then known England, which its borders were just above Lancashire. Bar Beacon, of course, we all know Bar Beacon. That is a beacon hill, being one of the highest points in the Midlands, although it's not a very high hill. It's like a lot of these Omphlos hills. They are just enough high to see either coast on a very good day. Rather like the central hill of Ireland, Ushni, it doesn't look like a great hill, but it's an Omphlos hill, a kind of axis mundi hill. The centre of the ancient Celtic realms. So Bar Beacon was another site. And also the legends around Bar Beacon were interesting because they had a lot to do with this line, which I'll talk about later. The Cloud is an amazing hill just not far from Congleton, which to the local people is like the Glastonbury tour of the Midlands. Alderley Edge, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Alderley Edge. It's a great place to go for a walk. Has this great ridge full of monuments and mystery. And that was an occult centre of man. For people living in Manchester, they often go up to the Alderley Edge because it's their sacred hill or hedge, if you like. Dunsop Bridge and Millenhull are the two geographical centres of Great Britain, with and without their outer islands. It just so happens this line goes right through the modern geographical centres, Ordnance Survey determined. If you go into Dunsop Bridge, a tiny village near the northern Pennines, you'll see a phone box etched with all these lines going out and saying this is the centre of Great Britain. Shap was one of the most impressive prehistoric temples outside of Avebury. I'm sure a few of you may have heard of Avebury. It's the largest stone circle in the world, in my opinion. Shap had a similar temple, not quite as big as Avebury, but it had long avenues of stones running over a mile with great stones over 6-7 feet high and about 5 feet broad. They were all dynamited, unfortunately, in the 16th, 17th and 18th century. It just so happens Shap is in an area of geology that you can get gunpowder from, and so the locals actually blew up the monuments, so there's nothing left. It was almost like Avebury was nearly destroyed. Hoare Hill was another sacred site that's now been termed as the Stonehenge of the Edinburgh area. Dunkeld is a great place where the kings of Scotland picked Scots were crowned. Blair Athol was a site of kingship, and Blair was the centre of Sutherland. So not only does it connect with the great old cities like Dunfermline, the capital of Scotland, and Winchester, the old capital of England, it connects with all these known centres. So when I discovered that, I thought I'm onto something here. But I also was quite good at dowsing from an early age. And I read a book called Sun and the Serpent, written by Hamish Mill and Paul Hawkins. And they'd followed this straight St. Michael line with dowsing rods. But what Hamish, the great dowser, discovered was that the line wasn't straight. It would wander off to a holy well, or to a stone circle, or to a cave, or a lake. And eventually, after following this line and following all these different places, it formed a wiggly line around this alignment. But at certain places, it shrunk and went into the ground, and then came out again and went back to its normal size again. And this line was something like as wide as these chairs. That would shrink down to a point and come out. And he called these points node points, and they were mysterious. He didn't know why these energies were shrinking. It's as if there was something underground that these energies were connecting with. As if they were like power cables that were coming to a junction box. And I kind of saw them like power cables in a way, because it is energy. And dowsers can measure these big lines of power. So what Hamish had discovered, he eventually realised, was like the Chinese dragon lines. And these lines when we analyse them with dowsing rods, are divided into 12 segments. One 6 female, 6 male, alternate, like positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, blah, blah. And that you could even dowse their colours with it using a disc and asking which colour is this line, and when you point to a certain colour, it shows you a positive. So we determined that the male current was a golden colour and the female colour was a violet colour. And Hamish discovered a similar thing on his lines. And it kind of related to the Chinese philosophy of dragon currents, because according to the Chinese, the dragon currents flow through the landscape, and the old emperor used to employ geometrists to focus these energies and direct them through the palaces and the graveyards and the living quarters of the kings and emperors. So, who were these geometrists? And they were like dowsers in a way. They could track the currents, but they could also manipulate them. But it was a secret of how these people could manipulate these energies. It required deep occult knowledge and some, in part, psychic ability on the part of the geometer to be able to direct these dragon lines. But according to the Chinese, these lines are natural in the land. They seem to run along between certain peaks. And this is why I discovered the spine of Britain. I discovered this Venus line had a line of beacon hills. So it was as if there's a natural energy following these lines of beacon hills. But throughout the centuries, they've been drawn off to certain churches, cathedrals, and that made me think maybe in the past the geometers were able to manipulate the energies of Albion, which is the name for Britain, Scotland and England, meaning White Island. And they were able to, the bishops, the saints, the early Christian saints were able to manipulate these lines, I believe. And we came across one particular character in Winchester who was actually known as a wizard called Henry Hoare. And he was a bishop of Winchester, one of the most powerful men in the country. He was more powerful, in fact, than the king at the time, King Stephen. And he built many of his churches and holy sites upon the dragon flow that we discovered through the south of England. So here the Chinese are depicting the female dragon with her violet colour, exactly the same colour as our line. And she is in the valleys, whereas the male current in his golden colour is high above the landscape. So this is what we discovered with the feminine flow, which had a very feminine feel to it, a very softer feel to it. She would stick to the valleys and rivers and lakes, caves, whereas the male current would go to the high points, the beacon hills, even man-made obelisks seem to attract heat and flow. And this is what Hamish also discovered on the Michael line, written in Sun and Serpent. I also discovered that the dragon or serpent lines have been manipulated by man for many centuries. And here we're showing a Babylonian, Assyrian depiction of man controlling the two great serpents. And I'd also seen this in a Mayan pyramid once I went to Mexico, where it showed you this great earth serpent with everybody riding on the back of it, as if the serpent flow was integral to our life and our balance of life with the land and our connection with the land. So if you control the dragon force, you can control anything. You can control people, control good and bad. You have almost the knowledge of the Grail. And here the Celts would depict the dragon images, often in connection with nature, as you see here, with sort of nature coming out of its mouth like the green man, the green dragon. And also connected with infinity. So they understood that the dragon force is also connected to man and everything else as well. So it's still a bit of a mystery, but we wanted to explore this line to see what would happen, where it would go. If it didn't go anywhere, we wouldn't bother writing a book. As it happened, it went to a lot of interesting places. Here we see in Ireland, the early Druids would also control the dragon force. And they saw it as a trinity, the male, female, and it was kind of balanced, which is what we have our line, the male and female crows weaving around it like DNA. In fact, it's more similar to DNA than anything else. The Michael line and the Linus line are like two great strands of DNA through the countryside of our highway. Or the caduceus, the medical symbol of two snakes around the pole, is another ancient symbol that really depicts what we were finding. When we finished the exploration of this line 2 years ago, we discovered that they crossed at all these node points. And when we counted them all up, from the Isle of Wight to the top of Scotland, the Balmain, there were 33 node points. And it didn't twig to it until somebody goes, well, don't you know there's 33 vertebrae in the human spine? So we thought, I wonder if that's just a coincidence. But interestingly, you'll note that, that the node points are kind of clustered between Birmingham and Manchester. Now on the Michael line, they're rather clustered. And really clustered around Glastonbury, Avebury, the two great occult centres, metaphysical centres of Britain. And so there's something important about the Staffordshire countryside, why these great serpents have crossed so many times in Staffordshire. So St Catherine's Hill was the first place I started to explore this aspect of the line and its edges. Here, the line itself on the map with all the other sites would strike through the hill and through the middle here. And here there was also a node point of Earth energy. So this is the best place to experiment with dowsing and follow the lines from there to see where it would take us. St Catherine's Hill is an Iron Age hill fort with one bank ring of ditch with a kind of enclosure in the middle. But it also has this incredible earth-cut labyrinth, which some people believe was actually built by Henry of Blois, because he was also Count of Chartres Cathedral in France. And this labyrinth is exactly the same as the Chartres labyrinth inside Birmingham, or slightly a derivative of it, if you like. But it's positioned on a hill like this. Here's the bank and ditch around it with the entrances, 3 entrances. Here's the alignment that we calculated that takes in all these beacon hills and cities. It touches the labyrinth you see here through these earthworks, and there's a central mound here inside the trees where the two currents come together. But they come together twice at this place, so we felt that St Catherine's Hill was very, very important, because not many places did we discover after there where the actual currents come together twice. So, and this seemed to support the folklore of this hill, which many people have said was a very, very special. In fact, it was Arthur's Round Table itself, because Arthur is associated with Winchester. And even the time of King John and Edward III, there were great jousting ceremonies held, reenacting sort of Arthurian themes right up until the 13th, 14th century. So it was thought to be Arthur's Camelot. And I thought that was interesting because Carlisle, according to the history of that area, is supposed to be the Camelot of the North. So this line was connecting with the Camelot of the South, the Camelot of the North. And as we was following the lines up and down the country, we also found other places associated with King Arthur, because King Arthur sleeps over the edge. And another place called Caver's Law Castle in Stoke, which one of the currents took us to. And I knocked on the door. There's an old lady who then was running Caver's Law Castle and said, come in. And I said, I'm a historian, I'm just researching the place. I didn't tell her I was dowsing a dragon line through her house. But she then gave me a book on its history. And the first page it says that this was Arthur's court, an ancient legend. So Lots of things like that were happening to us, where we're finding these incredible connections with mythical figures. Also St. George, and later we discovered Shakespeare is prevalent at many of the places on the line. So, but it all began at the south of England, the Isle of Wight. So from St. Catherine's Hill I decided, right, we'll start the journey on the Isle of Wight, the most southerly point of the UK. And of course I discovered a lot about the Isle of Wight through the research, one of which is that it's the most haunted island in Britain. And so I've always been fascinated with the supernatural and paranormal, and the Isle of Wight is definitely the most paranormal island. It has ghost pubs, it has time slips, it has people seeing Roman soldiers, balls of light, UFOs, abductions. Every type of phenomena goes on in the Isle of Wight. Witchcraft, you name it. So has anybody here got a connection with the Isle of Wight? Well, it's a fascinating place. And I discovered that there must be something about the island that causes that kind of activity. And this is something that I wanted to share with you because it's also partly to do with some of the mystery of Rosemary as well. So, the Isle of Wight, in geological terms, has this great fault line running through it. But the most interesting line is this dark green line here. It's shaped like a serpent because these are the needles, the famous chalk stacks that you see. And here's the head of the serpent, which is this great bulbous down, which is the highest hill on the island, can be seen from everywhere. So its head and tail are almost highlighted in geology. This bend here is right on the chain of hills. So if you look to this in 3D, you'll see an S shape running through the island from the back. And that kind of mirrors the path of the moon across the ecliptic, as people have noticed in the past. So there's something very strange about the Isle of Wight. That this side is a mirror of the other in ancient times. The coastal erosion has made it more dissimilar, but at one time it was very much a diamond shape. So it was kind of like a duality island. And the Druids obviously saw it as ancient, because at one time the river here sectioned off this side of the island, and the river here sectioned off this side of the island. So it was one island consisting of 3 islands. And the Druids, as you know, were very much revered the Trinity of 3. So, putting in the green sand ridge, what is this fault anyway? This is what fascinated me. It's to do with this sandstone, this particular type of sandstone that creates psychic phenomena and paranormal occurrences. And it's called green sand, not the green sand. And if you look at it, it's very rich in iron. It's very orangey, bright orangey. It's also called firestone, or its other nickname is dragon food, which seems perfect for it. This seam runs in this S shape, following the ecliptic moon. Under pressure, because it has so much iron in it creates a magnetic field. And it's the magnetic field itself that creates the sort of rips in time and space. I could talk to you all night about the Isle of Wight, but because this is where the line comes down through and connects with this powerful island, it's somehow kind of battery to charge the line, because the line comes right through the neck of the serpent. And the two currents come together and load right on the neck, right under this fault. And because it didn't come together at any known prehistoric site, we was kind of disappointed at first, although it was in a tumulus. It didn't occur to us about the power of this fault line until I realised that the ridge itself was the fault and that it was crossing on the ridge. So that is a clue, because we discovered that there are many more sites to do with fault lines. And St. Catherine's Hill is upon a chalk fault, and so is the Great Buffington White Horse, which is on a green sand fault. Because after the Isle of Wight, we followed these chains of beacon hills from St. Catherine's Hill to Beacon Hill up near Highclere, where a lot of crop circles and explosion phenomena happens. The green sand ridge runs to Walbury Hill, and then on to towards Uffington itself, which is on the famous Ridgeway which connects with Avebury. But this was another place where the currents were focused and noded twice. So it was very important. The energies were telling us there's something very important about this place. And then I realised that this chalk cut figure, which is said to be a white horse, is actually a white dragon. And it's actually telling us that this is a place of the dragon. Because the hill just below it is here, is known to be Dragon Hill. From at least Saxon times it was known as Dragon Hill. So, and from here you stand and look up at the horse and or the dragon or its majesty. But if you look at the figure itself, it has horns and kind of like a beak here. This very, very long back, which is certainly not in the style of a horse. But then you could say it was stylistic. But then we discovered that the horse dates to 1800 BC. And in England at that time there were no heavy horses, no large horses. They were just ponies like you see on Exmoor and Dartmoor. They were the native horse to this country. The larger horses weren't introduced to this country until much later, Roman and Norman times. So this horse being 1800 BC isn't a depiction of a Dartmoor pony. It's Dragon Hill. And this is where the Michael line and the British line come together. So, an important place where the two great lines come together. And this hill itself seems to have been very important because it's shaped to have a platform on the top. And the currents all come together near this white patch here, which is said to be where the dragon, in legend, where St. George slayed the dragon. But I discovered it's more of an allegory, an allegorical story that has two meanings, rather like in Sonic sort of information. It's something to do with the dragons being killed here, or the dragons being closed down or shut down in a way. Because the energy of the dragon force can be manipulated and used. And so maybe at a certain time in our history, they decided to stop. If the enemy or the Saxons were coming to overtake that landscape, they closed down the power of the land so they wouldn't be used by another tribe. Well, this place certainly is a ceremonial site because there's a great bowl next to it here called the manger. And if you stand down in the bottom, it's like a natural amphitheatre, and you can hear a whisper in the bottom. So it's obviously a place where a lot of tribes came together. And a lot of wars and battles were fought in this area. So, but the thing is, the north, the view really is north, there's no view south. And it's then we discovered that there's alignments of sites up the spine of Albion from here, directed towards setting stars. And so I looked in Sky Globe in the past when this horse was laid out in 1800 BC, saw that the stars of Cygnus were falling right into the horizon here, in line with the horse and the Venus line itself. So then I discovered that the purpose was this line of cities laid out towards certain sacred stars. And then it just happened that other authors were bringing out books on the sacredness of Cygnus, and that tribes all over the world in ancient times, from 3000 BC to 1000 BC, were revered the stars of Cygnus more than any other. Mainly because, I suppose, in the north, they were the largest stars that you could visibly see set into the landscape. And that included Deneb. And of course, Cygnus is shaped like a swan. So, and what Deneb does, and this at the altitude of Uffington, it comes down to the horizon, touches the horizon, and goes up again, like the swan swooping down, collecting something. Of course, the ancients saw this as the stars of the swan coming down to collect souls. And this place turned out to be a big funeral area from the Bronze Age. There's more barrows and dead buried in this area than anywhere else. It was kind of a centre of the dead. So it may well be that funerals were taking place of great kings and priests upon this land when the stars of their dead came down so their souls would be taken off of the other world. there's a big story about this area that we refer to and go on a bit more in detail in the book, but of course I haven't got time to. So I want to get more local to, so that you can actually go out and possibly see what I'm talking about and maybe experience it. So I was talking before about the cluster of node points, and that this area, Barbeacon, Castle Ring, Etching Hill, the Cloud, Alderley Edge, are great node points of this line. So, but remember, we were just following these lines. We didn't have any preconceived ideas about any of these sites. We just happened to find, for instance, we'd stay at a B&B somewhere and spend a day following the male line, see where it goes, and then come back the next day we'd walk and follow the female, and then we'd write it all, catalogue it down, see where they cross, and then afterwards we'd do the research. And this is an amazing thing because Barbeacon and Castle Ring are connected by this ancient spirit path that the arch druid himself, who was the most important religious man in Druidic times, pre-Roman times, would live, and constantly made this journey between Barbeacon and Castle Ring. That may not be a true story, but it's pointing to something, telling us a connection, some kind of spiritual connection between the two places. Etching Hill we found actually is in the middle of Cannock Chase, and we had real trouble. We knew we kind of avoided some of the areas because there was no roads going to them. So what sometimes we bypassed it by dowsing a few miles further north, picking the line up again and carrying on. But what happened is, north of Etching Hill, we found that the currents had crossed. So if the male was on the right, the female was on the left. When we got up north of Etching Hill, they were switched around. So we realised then, in the evening, when we were looking at our results, that there must be a node point there. So we actually went back and followed the lines through over private land and ended up on this amazing little hill with these rocks on the top called Etching Hill. Does anybody know Etching Hill? Somebody? So that was a magical place. And on top of Etching Hill used to be a prehistoric barrow, but it's all been, the rocks are all taken away and now there's just a hole in it. And somebody at one time put a great flagpole. But today it's all been cleaned up and it's quite a magical site. So Birmingham fascinated us because it's probably the largest city on our line. Winchester's a city, but it's easy to get through. Birmingham is much different. So I always think, if we're going to look at the mystery of the place, why did the currents, because we can see the currents are coming together towards Birmingham. So Birmingham was important to this line, but we didn't know why or what. So I looked at the geology and realised that there may be something interesting, because there's a great fault line that goes right through Birmingham, which divides mudstones and limestones and sandstones, as you can see in the plan. So the friction of those two substances around the weed obviously is the cause of some interest for us, because we discovered that St Martin's Church is built right next to that fault line. Now Paul Devereux, the great lay hunter in the 70s, discovered or actually worked it out that most of the real prehistoric sites like stone circles and barrows and burial chambers like West Kennet Barrow are all built within yards or half a mile at least of a fault line. And so he felt that the ancients understood that there was something powerful about fault lines that could make, and maybe they were tapping into the power of the fault line. Because meters will actually show that when certain rocks are crushed, they give off a magnetic field, and that can be picked up by meters. And also, that crushing of rocks can also cause balls of light, so earth lights is what they've discovered. And certain places like Rollright Stones, Avebury, are known to have lots of balls of light, like Moseley. Moseley is one of those places where people have seen strange balls of light. And so that was something to think about. And then we looked at the old centre of Birmingham after we arrived at New Street station and the train. neither of us have been into the city centre before in our lives. Now, I've got a connection with Birmingham because my mother's family were all from Birmingham. They lived in the Wednesbury area, and then my grandfather became famous as a goalkeeper for Aston Villa. In the 1930s, he played goalkeeper. His name was Fred Biddleston, and he took Aston Villa into the first division. So he was in our family. Everybody looked at that. He was this great man, 6'3", hands like shovels. And so often as a child, I would come to Birmingham and visit his family. And he actually bought a house in Great Bar and knocked two houses together and had a big family, and my mother was one of them. And they used to go up to Barbeacon for picnics every weekend during the summer. So my family already knew Barbeacon very well before I did. I'd only, after I'd found all these things, my mum said, "Oh yes, I've even taken you up there." So arriving in Birmingham was interesting because we didn't know what to expect. I had no preconceived ideas. I didn't know anything about its layout or what was ancient, what is history. So we started afresh. So the first place we thought we'd connect with would be the oldest place. And the oldest holy site I could find on any website or any book would be St Martin's Church. It's the oldest church in Birmingham. So I thought. Turned out Aston Church is probably on the site of an older church than that, but we'll come to that later. So this site, here you see St Martin's Church in a circular enclosure. And this seemed to be in connection with these two other sites. This is an old map of Birmingham from about 1750. And here we see a rectory that's surrounded by a moat which runs off the River Ree. A holy well called Lady Well here. This manor place, which is like an island with a moat around it, turned out to be Birmingham Castle. It was more of a fortified manor than it was a great castle. But that's all I knew at the time. And of course, there's nothing left of these places now. This whole car park south of St Martin's Church. Although there's a little moat lane that sort of springs up a memory of this place, but nothing left of Ladywell or the rectory. But even up to Victorian times, there was still the parsonage. It was then called the parsonage. This was then still a kind of rectory, manor house, sorry, not rectory. The river was still connecting the two of them. And this also expanded to include the Bullring area. Bullring fascinated me because when I've done a lot of research in Derbyshire, many of the prehistoric henges also have the name Bullring. So I wondered if that was something to do with here because of its circular sort of pattern, shape. Its churchyard is circular, which often indicates it was an earlier prehistoric site. Because throughout the country we found a lot of churchyards, or churches were built into the pavement sites. And perhaps the Bullring was a place that people would come and gather and hold fairs in ancient times. Or it may have been a place where a bull was baited, which, as you know, is an ancient practice that lasted right until the 16th century, where a wild dog would basically bite the bull to a state of frenzy. And this actually put more adrenaline into the meat so that the meat tasted better. And that horrible practice was stopped in the 16th century, but a lot of these bull rings still exist. So was it the prehistoric bull ring from Derbyshire, or was it the bull ring baiting bulls? We don't know. So what we discovered through walking around the streets is that the male gold line, or if you don't want to call him the male, you can call him the sort of solar energy or positive energy, and the feminine is sort of watery, lunar energy, if you like, yeah. So the lunar energy, if you like, was passing through the site of the manor, the castle. So that fascinated me, and so I looked up the history, and that castle was built by a family called the Birmingham. It wasn't they took their name, they were people who came in with William the Conqueror, and they took their name from the actual site, because Birmingham is actually a Saxon word. The family of Burn, belonging to the tribe of the Ingers, created a ham, an area that was set aside for a certain number of families. So Birmingham actually comes from much earlier than Norman time. So the Normans took the name from the Saxon. Now these Birminghams were very powerful in the area. They were eventually given charters by kings of England, like Henry II. And one of them was given, I think Peter the Birmingham was given a charter to hold a market north of his castle. And that market became the Bulgari area. And because this place was the only place that had a market within 50 miles, you can imagine how many people came to that market. So it was very popular, he made a lot of money from it at the time, and it became known as a centre of trade. And it expanded and expanded, and eventually it was the Freemasons actually that brought in craftsmen to the place, so I'll go into that after. So Birmingham is quite important to the history of this city. And there we see that, if you look on old maps, that the lunar cone is actually going through the Birmingham Castle, as well as the church, St Martin's. And the male cone is going through the Ladywell side, which is more interesting. It's almost the opposite. And we didn't know why that was, but then it went through the Odeon Cinema, and as we were going past the cinema, we saw a blue plaque saying this is the site of the Guild Hall. It belonged to a guild of the Holy Cross. So that was something we'd come across before, following the lines through Stratford. Because there was also a guild of the Holy Cross there that actually founded Stratford. They had connections with Shakespeare as well. So the whole journey was taken up a flavour of the sort of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, as we were passing through Stratford and then beyond. And then we discovered out this guild, this mysterious guild, was behind the sort of building of Birmingham. We thought there's something more Masonic about this. So, looking at St Martin's Church, it's unusual to find churches down in the valley set by the river. It usually shows an ancient site. In most cities and towns today, the churches or main churches are on a high point. But you'll find the most ancient churches, such as those in Wales, that have a pre-Saxon origin, are often down by the river. So St Martin's is down by the river. Because you know, when you go through Birmingham, you can't see St Martin's. You see the spire sort of eye level, which is, you'd expect to be up on high, like most churches, because of its ancientness. Now, when it was first built by the Birminghams, the stone that was used deteriorated quite quickly. It's not superior sandstone, so it started to decay. So it was refaced again to around about the 17th century, looking like this with a great tower. And then in Victorian times, they had to encase it with brick to preserve the fabric. A lot of people said this was a disgraceful way to treat an ancient building, but it was the only way at the time they could actually preserve the structure without destroying it, because the stones were that kind of worn. But some of the stonemasons who produced this new exterior actually produced some fine stonework. And inside we found, dowsing the current inside the cathedral, we found the female current coming across in front of the altar through the Birmingham their tombs. And these are the founders of Birmingham. And they were right on the lunar feminine current. And this we found interesting because the feminine energy is far more powerful often than the solar energy. And so it was a little coincidence that they chose this site to be buried. Or is it all part of a synchronicity? This is what we're coming to as we're going further up the line, that there's too many coincidences. And that there has to be some kind of connection that everybody's tuning into. Interestingly, right where the female current coming through the wall, this is a carving of a dragon and a female head, as if the old stonemasons knew that the feminine dragon was coming through there. They pictured a dragon with a female head over it, as if to say this is where the female dragon current enters. Those kinds of coincidences happen to us all the time. It became almost normal to us. And so we understood the old medieval stonemasons were really in tune with these dragon images. They understood, they knew, they were trained somehow to connect with them. But those of you who have been around St Martin's Church will see that there are dragons all over it. And often we find where dragon lines from the mitral line or the Venus line go through a church, we find lots of dragons there. I think St Martin's is one of the finest churches of grotesque. You see eagles pecking away at a green man, two dragons. This one, my favourite, two dragons biting the ears of a green man. The green man is the pagan representative of the power in the land. It's sort of, not the masculine force, but the sort of solar force as well. And this is where the family cult enters St Martin's, right with a female head, with a dragon body. Incredible, really. So the ballroom looked like this, and you see the early pictures, etchings. So you're looking down St Martin's by the river, but you're heading up to a higher sandstone plateau, away from the fault line. And this is the plaque after we were following the current to the Guildhall. And I discovered the Guildhall was also on the site of this ancient grammar school. And this grammar school had a lot of famous visitors, including Burne-Jones, and a lot of pre-Raphaelites went there. Tolkien went to this school. So the Guild of the Holy Cross Chapel at Stratford had a big connection with the Guild Chapel of Birmingham. They were the same group of people. And inside, in the windows in here, depicts John Shakespeare as one of the masters of the Guild. And so he was like a Grand Master of an early Freemasonic society. And his son was Shakespeare. But very few writers refer to the fact that his father was high up in these guilds. So, and because our current was taking us through churches connected with the Guild of the Holy Cross, we started to look at this guild and look through history and find out more about them. And they are quite a mystery. There's a lot of writers saying that the guild goes back into the midst of times where hardly anything is known about them, but they were very powerful because kings of England were sponsoring them, and certainly bishops as well. So they had a lot of very important people supporting them. So that fascinated me. And look at their interesting, this is the seal of the Guild of the Holy Cross. They show two women, probably Mary Magdalene and his mother, and Mary, holding the sort of cruets, one collecting the sweat and the other collecting the blood of Christ. So, and these are supposed to be the two grails that were brought to England from the Holy Land and supposedly taken to Glastonbury. But there's a lot of mystery around the symbolism of the Guild of the Holy Cross. So as we follow the currents from St Martin's up to through the ballroom, the male current, I believe that's sort of male current, missed the rotunda and headed up, surprisingly, to St Philip's. And so the other one was coming to St Philip's as well. So we thought, well, why would St Philip's be a place where the currents would node? Because nodes only occur at sacred, holy places, but St Philip's is just a cathedral built on a piece of ground donated to the church. So we had a look at the layout, of course, and we realised that, interestingly, there's a lot of Masonic influences on St Philip's. at the time it was built, St Philip's is actually a church, or cathedral, if you like, that was going to replace St Martin's, because congregation was too large for St Martin's, so they wanted a bigger church. So they built St Philip's on the highest point in Birmingham. And interestingly enough, it's 365 feet above sea level, which is the number of days in a year. And it's also the exact height of the top of St Paul's Cathedral in London. So the top of the dome here is the same height on sea level. So it shares this relationship with St Paul's Cathedral, which was basically what Henry VIII built as the kind of temple to replace the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Became St Paul became the replacement for it. Because up until then, everybody went to Rome to worship in the most holy of churches. But the idea was we wanted to build Jerusalem in Britain, and so that was the idea. Along with the Rosicrucian Freemasons at the time built St Paul's to replace that. And this church being built at that, something to do with the height, to me is kind of another kind of very spiritual centre. It's a kind of mirror of St Paul's in London. There's a lot of interesting information around here. I can't even remember some of it listed in the book. But I did note that in my experience of travelling the world and looking at ancient buildings, sacred geometry is important. Because sacred geometry creates an atmosphere, it creates a holiness about a place. And if it's perfect geometry, using the pentagram or the hexagram, the six-sided style, then it creates harmony. But if it's created in a warped version like this, then it's more about control. And we've noticed a lot, and other authors have also noticed that warped pentagrams or warped hexagrams or anything tend to be ones where humans want to create a place of power to have control over others and the landscape around it. So it's interesting that instead of having a perfect shaped pentagram area around St Philip's, this is laid out with a warped pentagram. And the pentagram is the most powerful symbol of sacred geometry, as some of you might know. So to have this shape really is a statement. We know this is Temple Row, and this a lot of it's to do with the Freemasons. Thomas Archer built this church. He was also Freemason, and he was very close to Queen Anne, the last of the Stuarts. And also Borromini, the great Italian architect, whose designs influenced him to build St Philip's. So he used a lot of sacred geometry in it. If you go to St Philip's, it has a look of more of a temple, a pagan temple, than it does in a Christian church, with the great pillars. So he was kind of creating more a temple, a pagan temple, than it was a Christian church. And this is what happened. The solar energy came in, met with the lunar energy, right on the whole altar. But interesting, instead of the female cone going off north, because we dowsed her outside here first, we found her coming out this door. So for some reason she was drawn off to the east, and I wondered what was drawing that powerful line. The male cone was drawn off to the west, and passing through the obelisks in the ground. So as if the obelisks were attracting the male cones, or somebody placed the obelisk on the floor of the male cone. So there's the other obelisk that marks the male cone. So those two obelisks mark the male line, those who wanted vows. But it seemed that the female cone was being drawn to the floozy in the jacuzzi, which was actually opened by Princess Diana, the immortal goddess of Britain. But it became the modern centre of Birmingham. The old centre is certainly around St Martin's, where the parsonage and the castle. But in the Freemasons and claimants into Birmingham obviously created a new centre, because you were seen as pole with signs going all directions from this side here. So they made this a kind of new sort of, and this is at the time of the Industrial Revolution as well. So Birmingham was starting to become the most powerful manufacturing place in the world at the time. So as we know, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, almost everywhere in Europe had something made in Birmingham. So are we nearly due for a break?
Yeah.
So I'll just wind you up. So we're about halfway through Birmingham now, so what happened after is even more fascinating. But we'll look at this after the break, shall we?
Yeah. Let's say thanks very much.
Let's say welcome back to Gary. Thank you very much.
Okay, where are we? In Victoria Square. So we were wondering why this lunar female current was taken us away from St. Philip's Church into the square. And so we doused the line going through this fountain. And I remember when I returned home and looked at old maps of Birmingham, I discovered that there was this building called Christ Church, which actually stood right on the flow between St. Philip's and that fountain. And interestingly enough, this building only stood for 85 years, and then they pulled it down. But it's quite a magnificent temple-like building.
Where was it pulled down?
When was it pulled down? It's late Victorian times. And I'm not sure the exact date, but if you Google it in Christchurch, Victoria Square, you'll find a couple of web pages about this unusual building.
They've got some Maximus Church from the proceeds from that.
Off the stones of the church.
The same of the church, yes.
So this is a bit of a mystery, right, this church, which almost marked the onslaught of the new industrial Birmingham. It was pulled down after such a short time. But the feminine flow went right down the middle of this building. And here, with an old etching of Birmingham, you can see this was Christ Church here, marking the sort of centre. And this great temple, based upon the Greek temple of Castor and Pollux, Roman temple. Castor and Pollux were the two great stars of Gemini. So, and here we have the Chamberlain's Memorial and the Town Hall, I believe. So, if you look at the architecture, it's very interesting that in all the ancient cities we have sort of Roman copies of Roman buildings. And who would want to build a great Roman temple in central Birmingham unless it's something to do with power? So, interestingly enough, the female could create the corner of the town hall. But we never managed to get inside to see whereabouts it actually went through that corner, what was there now. But I believe that they have functions and chairs are laid out inside. I'm not sure what goes on in there now. Because remember, this was our first time in the city centre. We didn't know anything about history. We were just following these lines of energy to see where they would take us. So we just made a note of these buildings and just did some research.
You can just go in.
Yeah, but it wasn't open at the time we were there. Closed for some reason.
You can just go in out the back. You've got the keys.
Well, you'll have to come with us next time and then you can open all the doors. So, having a look at the plan that we discovered, here you can see the male solar force going through the site of the Guild Chapel, which is now the Odeon Cinema. Now, a friend of ours says, oh, have you not noticed that stone? There's a stone in the restaurant below Odeon Cinema that's got a Christian cross in it. And he said that marks something unusual. And he always felt it was unusual. But he didn't realise that was the site of this ancient Guild Chapel. So there is something left of that And we always find that these currents are sort of drawn to something, either a marker or a stone that's been left there. And it's as if something has been done to these stones to magnetise the current to go to them. So perhaps the line is still going to the Odeon cinema, not because of the cinema, but because of that stone that's in the restaurant below. It wasn't a McDonald's restaurant, is it? What's the restaurant below the Odeon cinema, I think? Or pizza place, I think. Have a look next time you're there and see if you can find the old stone. Because that has something to do with the line going through that building. And now you see it crossing at St Philip's. The feminine current being drawn off around the council house and the memorial chamber, and then swings around through the museum, art gallery, clipping both buildings, and then off to St Paul's Church, which is another mystery. So we arrived here, found the line doused around the outside, found the line coming through the altar area, this side of the church. And so we decided to go inside and have a look. I always carry a compass around me because I always find certain buildings are orientated to the Christian East-West. Some churches are not. And I had a hunch that this church wasn't orientated to a Christian direction. And I was right, because it was orientated 50 degrees at north, which is the direction the sun rises at the summer solstice. So I thought, that's strange, and because I read something about the history, and that it was a very important church. It was designed on St Martin's in the Fields in London, and one of the Wren churches. And that a lot of money was spent on this church, huge amounts of money. So I thought, well, if they're going to spend so much money and take meticulous plans to lay out the inside, then they wouldn't make a big mistake, like orientating it incorrectly. But so I pointed this out to the guide who was taking people around the church, and it stunned him, because nobody had ever asked him that before. And he said, no, that's east-west. He said, isn't it? I said, no, and I showed him the compass. And he couldn't believe it, that they may have made an error in orientating the building to a pagan sort of. But then, you know, if you look inside the church, again, it looks like a temple, isn't it? So our little trip so far through Birmingham was very Masonic, very pagan, with lots of pagan temples like the Castor and Pollux Town Hall. A goddess statue at the site of an ancient temple that was destroyed after 85 years. And throughout we were finding also that one particular street, the feminine current went through, in amongst that, I can't remember exactly where it's in the book, where the pre-Raphaelite was born, Burne-Jones. And so interestingly enough, Burne-Jones features a lot in other places along the line. So we were surprised to find his birthplace so close to this dragon energy. But then it wasn't surprising, because he was an inspired man, certainly inspired by the Arthurian themes, and produced some of the most amazing paintings with Arthurian themes, of course. And he also designed the windows in a lot of the churches along the Venus line, and certainly the windows in this church. But it was in this church we started to connect with certain characters from Birmingham, like Matthew Bolton, James Watts, and he's the old Murdoch, is it? William Murdoch. And we realised after a while, through reading the guidebooks, that they were part of a society called the Lunar Society. And that they met every full moon at certain places around Birmingham, and they would discuss all kinds of theories about each fight of the Industrial Revolution. So that certain inventors and great thinkers would gather, and they would share their ideas. This is what they said in guidance. So at St Paul's Church, Matthew Bolton and many of the Lunar Society members would actually go to the church. They had their own pews in this church. So that fascinated us. And then, of course, across the other side of the city on the mail code, yeah, St. Chad's, there's this rather strange-looking cathedral, which is St. Chad's Cathedral. It's quite striking, this red brick building designed by Puget in the early Victorian times. Because we found the current was going right through this side chapel here. Because we sort of dowsed around the whole outside, and here it was, both of us independently dowsed it going through this chapel. So we went through the front doors and saw that the whole it was quite impressive inside. I don't know if you've been to St. Chad's Cathedral, but it's quite impressive. But there's nobody in there, it's empty. But then when we walked into this chapel, it was full of people. So everybody was in this side chapel. And this side chapel is the Edward the Confessor chapel. And it's funny, there's a mail code going through the Edward the Confessor chapel. And, that's where everybody seemed to be. And the energy in there was certainly amplified by the mail dragons, certainly. And why everybody seemed to be in that side chapel, I don't know. But we discovered that it goes through an angle across the high altar, and that's when we came across the relics of St. Chad, which are kept there. And then we discovered that this was the first Catholic cathedral built after the Reformation in the whole of the UK. So it's a very important building. It was also became a minor basilica. A pope in Rome bestowed it as a basilica. So it was a very important religious site. We wasn't sure why the mail code was connected to this place, because there was no signs of anything there in prehistoric times or in ancient history. It's as if the code has somehow been drawn to this place in more recent times after it was built. And this is what we found, and also what Hamish found in the microline, that when a new church had been built and a congregation came together, whether it be a church or a mosque, the current would be drawn off to feed from the congregation, as if this power, this certain current, this dragon line, has a connection with us, has a connection with our consciousness. So when we get together and create emotion, either through prayer or even at football matches, that energy seems to draw the dragon force. And this church seems to draw the male current. And it was actually going through a part of the church which has the most prayers in that little chapel. This is the inside. There's relics of St. Chad here. And we didn't think anything of St. Chad at the time. We knew he was a bishop of Mercia, which is a great kingdom in the Netherlands in Saxon times, and that he was based at Lichfield, and that he did lots of good work and performed miracles, as a lot of these early saints did. But it was only when we started continuing up the line in dowsing the male current or the female current through churches that St. Chad had visited, we realised we were on the trail of St. Chad. And it was actually quite incredible. It's as if we'd actually read a book called A Pilgrimage of St. Chad through the Midlands. Because we were actually, even went through Lichfield Cathedral. But anyway, back to Birmingham. The next side on the line further up after St. Paul's Church was Soho House. Do you know? Any of you have been here? Yes, it was built by Matthew Poulton. And as Caroline was showing here with the dowsing rods, the line was going right through this part of the building. Often what we do when we get to these sites is that we douse around the outside first. So we doused around the side, found the current going in here, then we went around the outside to see where it comes out. So we then drew a rough plan where it goes through the inside, because often inside these places, the presence of dowsing rods can put a lot of people off or make people nervous. Or some people think we've got weapons, or they're not allowed to be used, or people think we're kind of crazy or wacky. Maybe I am. So we kind of plotted the line going through, and we went right through the dining room of this place. It's apparently the dining room, so there was no information there, so we got a guidebook, and apparently the dining room was where the Lunar Society used to meet. And we noticed that the fireplace is shaped like with pillars in a temple, and the pillars on the other side. And I sort of looked at this, and this is what almost like a Masonic temple. So we sort of become fascinated with the Lunar Society then. This is a picture of how it may have looked so fanciful, seen as a Lunar Society meeting. And so, Soho House, what was that all about? And Matthew Paulson built it from the proceeds of his great factory. Matthew Bolton was a bit of a genius. He knew how to bring the best out of people who had great ideas. And he had great ideas himself. I mean, he was quite an amusing man. But people like James Watt would come to him and say, I've got an idea for a steam engine, not sure how to take it further. And Matthew Bolton was somehow had the idea to, I know what you need. And so I've got the money to do it, let's produce it. And then so lots of inventors came into Matthew Bolton's bosom, and he brought the best out of them. And this fired the Industrial Revolution, which changed the world, as we know. So Matthew Bolton was a key character in the history of Birmingham, and made Birmingham famous as the greatest manufacturing capital of the world in those days. So who are the Lunar Society? Well, the members are very interesting and very renowned people. Even future presidents of America, what was the president called? Not Lincoln. Benjamin Franklin. Yeah, he was a member of the society. He used to come, whenever he visited England, he would come and join the society on many occasions. So it was certainly a great club of free thinkers at that time. But some of them were politicians, of course. So some of the greatest minds in the whole of the country were members of the Lunar Society. And they'd meet at certain places, and Soho House is one of them. So we thought all that was quite fascinating. And then we followed the female current further up, going through St Mary's Church in Hansworth. And we realised that there was an old Roman road that followed beside this church, and that may have been the site of something older. It may possibly a Roman temple. So we arrived there one sort of misty morning, not long after we doused the currents through Birmingham. Parked our car up, nearly got attacked by a wild dog, and which wasn't a good start. And then when we arrived, the church door was bolted. It says that there's no admittance until Sunday, and we had to go the next day, so we didn't have any time to go and explore the church. But we did plot where the line went through the church. And then later, when I got home, I googled it and found a plan of the church. The line seemed to be going through. Guess what the line went through? Matthew Bolton's tomb. So we couldn't make these things up because we didn't know anything about this church or this area. First time we ever visited it before. So what was the line doing, connecting with this man? Was this man connecting with the line, or was the line connecting with him? Or is it a bit of both, where somehow we are connected with the land and the energy is connected with Earth, and Matthew Bolton was inspired to do certain things, or build the house, Soho House, where it was built. Choose the burial site in this church. And this church had quite a few important burials, and most of the Lunar Society were buried in this church, along with the founder of the Football League and Aston Villa, which put me in contact with my grandfather and played for Aston Villa. Now the other line, I think it was the Mail Current, on the other side, was taken as north of Birmingham to Perry Hall Park. And so the line was passing through, across this moat into this square area of land. So it's a female current. And this was what was once a great house in Hall Park. And now it's just an area. But it's pulled down in favour of keeping Aston Wall. But Aston, apparently they had to knock one down to keep one up. So this one, unfortunately, was chosen to be destroyed because of the finances. So it's a shame in a way because the history of this house is quite spectacular. The current did go through it, the family current did go through this house. But unfortunately it's not there now, but you'll find going across this, the moat that still exists. Fascinating place. And not far off the alignment is the Quizlet roundabout, the Asda car park, where the stones, this has no connection with the currents or the land, but it's sort of up in there. If I see what I mean, here's the alignment. This is the M6. Here's Beacon Hall. There's Beacon up here. The female current comes across the ponds, the lakes, and through Beacon Hall, through the church and up to Beacon. And this roundabout here are these standing stones which commemorate the Lunar Society. So next time you go to Asda Car Park or Quizlet, take a look at these stones which all represent members of the Lunar Society. So the next amazing thing that happened to us is that, of course, the current is crossing the motorway here, going through these lakes, which is typical of feminine circle, which you also see lakes and watery places. But through the remains of Beacon Hall. Anybody know about Beacon Hall? You know, it's in sort of Park Room, it's been elected, so it goes to ruin. That's how it used to look in ancient times. It was owned by the Scott family. The Scott family were a very powerful family. They had a lot of connections with the royals. They built this great hall next to the lakes, the springs, tapped from the river. And when we Googled, because we couldn't get in there, it's all private, I think this is how it looks today. So English Heritage is trying to sort of restore it, but it's kind of in the pipeline. So I don't know what's going on, but you can't get near it today. But the grounds were designed by George Gilbert Scott, and he built lots of monuments, including a chapel in the grounds. And George Gilbert Scott was one of the great Freemasons who carried on the traditions of putting sacred geometry into buildings that he restored. So he brought back the mysteries into the church. Lots of green men were carved by George Gilbert Scott. So he wasn't related to the Scots, actually, even though his surname is Scott. He isn't one of the Scots from Beacon Hall. But what fascinated us, a female current was coming through this house and through the chapel that Gilbert Scott had built. Then we Googled this on the internet when we got home. Discovered it was one of the major meeting places of the Lunar Society. And that even Scott was not a member, but he allowed the Lunar Society to make use of their hall. So we wondered that because Scott also owned Beacon, that was his land, it was Scott Plantation on top of Beacon, the woods, named after him. So we then had the rumour that on full moon, that they actually used to walk from the house at Beacon. So we wondered why. And you sort of realise after, because when we got to Beacon, we discovered the mail current was coming up, and they were crossing on the node right atop of Beacon at Scott Plantation. So there was a place of power where the two currents were coming together right on Beacon at this point. And then we discovered that it used to have a stone circle on top of Beacon, which was destroyed. And then it was once a hill fort, and that was destroyed. And then they built a reservoir into it, which destroyed some more archaeology. And so Beacon has undergone all this kind of destruction over the centuries, but it was once a very, very sacred place to be. And there's even caves underneath it. On the way to Birmingham, the family passed through St Margaret's Church, the Great Bar. And as I was approaching the church from Birmingham Hall, I recognised this is where my mother used to go as a child, because it's down the road from Great Bar. So my mother actually said that it was one of her special places. But I'd never visited the church before, but she told me about it. So it's interesting that following these lines have taken me back to my own roots as well. So here we have a sort of a rundown of what we've just done, from the crossing point of the Cathedral of St Philip's, through St Paul's, Soho House, Hammersmith Church, St Mary, Perry Hall, Great Bar Hall, swinging down through St Margaret's to cross Barbeacon and the Melcombe, who makes a journey up towards Aston. So this is what happens on Google Earth. Here's the line, the straight alignment of sites. Passing in between the church here of St Paul's, Peter, and Aston Hall itself. Now Aston Hall, many of you been there? Aston Hall? Yeah. You know that Indigo Jones designed it. Anybody know anything about Indigo Jones? He was responsible for a lot of the mysterious buildings. Lots of authors are writing about the knowledge that, the Rosicrucian knowledge that Indigo Jones put into a lot of buildings.
He designed St Paul's Historic Garden.
Yes, he designed a lot of buildings, but the man he is a man of mystery, but he happens to be there's a book called On the Quest of Merlin, written by Graham Phillips, and he followed this trail from the Rosicrucians that a lot of the knowledge that was held by the Catholic Freemasons was taken over to America with the Pilgrim Fathers, and that they established certain places. America became the sort of the new Catholic Freemason land of opportunity, if you like, and that's why most of the cities in America, like Washington, are laid out in sacred geometry. Many books written about this. This is nothing but. Apparently Indigo Jones had built a monument over where the Pilgrim Fathers had landed, and this had something to do with Merlin. But the book's a fascinating book, but Indigo Jones is a key character in one of the mysteries to do with the Grail and Arthur and Merlin. And he happened to have designed and built Aston Hall right next to this fine garden. And it fascinated us that there was something of a mystery in this house. But as yet, we have not been allowed to look at symbolism, so that's something for us to look at further on. But at the time, we were fascinated with the church because the actual mail corridor doesn't go through the house, but through the church. What drew us to the church is not just the line, but its history. We discovered it was built on the site of a Saxon minster, and that it was the most powerful minster in the whole of the Birmingham area. In fact, nearly all the other places like Edgbaston and I can't remember the other two places, the other two parishes, but they were all sub-parishes of Aston. So Aston was the main spiritual religious centre of Birmingham in those days, in early times. And that's interesting because that's where the line goes through Birmingham, the oldest part, the most powerful part. And it's the same in Manchester. The line went through Manchester. It passes, it misses Old Trafford, the football ground, misses the centre of Manchester, but it goes through Ordsall Hall. And Ordsall Hall was a very important house, rather like Aston Hall is in Birmingham. It's the largest house in that city. And we discovered Ordsall Hall was where the Radcliffe family, who were descended from the Angevin dynasty, had brought in the 15th century, all these weavers from France, the Flemish weavers. And it was their presence and their descendants who fired up this sort of textile industry in Manchester, because of all the wool and sheep farming in the area as well. So, in a way, that hall was integral to the power of Manchester, and Aston Hall probably has something to do with the power of Birmingham. And we haven't quite got to the bottom of that yet. But certainly the church nearby. It's right next to the line, but it's a male current going through it. It's certainly the oldest Christian site in the Birmingham area.
There's 2 bishops of Birmingham, aren't there, as well? Yeah, is that right?
So again,
There's 2 bishops of Birmingham.
The assistant bishops of Birmingham is the Bishop of Aston.
That's right, yeah. No other city has that.
yes. So that says something about the importance of Aston. Forgotten today. In fact, very few people actually been in the church. So last year we decided to actually hire the church and the hall to do a talk on this very thing I'm talking about now. And a lot of people came because they've always wanted to go in the church. They've never been in, so they didn't even know what we were talking about. They just wanted to come along. But in the end, it was fascinating. Everybody loved it. But Aston Church is a fantastic place. It has this immersion pool in the middle, which is very interesting. It's right on the line itself. So,
That's you.
yes, absolutely. And they placed it right on the male current that goes down through the church. We actually died. So somebody intuitively had put this immersion pool right on the line. There's solar energy.
James Watts rented Aston Hall.
Yeah.
He never owned it, I don't think, but he lived there for a long time.
Really, that's interesting. But also, we have the link with Shakespeare in the church as well, because the Arden family are buried there. And Shakespeare's mother was Sir Arden. She was one of the Ardens. Is related to the people who are buried in Aston Church. So there's some quite illustrious families, including the Holt family, who actually built Aston Hall and buried in that church. So we often found that even in other places, that where the line goes through these churches, certainly the families that are buried on the current tend to be families who are connected with knowledge, the old bloodlines, if you like. And this Aston Church is it's an amazing church. It's supposedly, you can visit it on Sunday afternoons, but often it's locked and not open. But there is a phone number you can ring to arrange to go and see it. It does have a lot of medieval features still left inside, but one of my favourites is a creation window. I don't think I've got this on the slide, no. And it shows you that all of creation, animals, humans, everything, surrounding nature, and in the middle, a swan, which I thought was rather odd, because you wouldn't expect that to be the center. You expect it as sort of something representative of God or the great creator, but instead, everything's centered around a swan.
Is that the astrological thing though, about the swan?
Well, it's to do with the energy of Cygnus and the swan representing the star system, because Andrew Collins.
We are 2
Yes, that's right. But the swans, I think, synchronicity always plays a part. It may be the guy who designed the Aston Church. I have no idea about the church being on this line that points towards the star system of Cygnus. It's just a coincidence he happened to design this incredible window and have its centerpiece as a swan. Or was he sort of in tune with everything and that's what came out? But we thought it was fantastic to see that creation of the swan and mirror, because what they discovered about Cygnus is that Cygnus, the star system of Cygnus, is beaming out this electrons through space in a straight line, rather like a beam, a laser beam. It's caused through a quark star that's actually drawing energy off another, and channeling that energy and then shooting it out in a straight line. And this beam of charged electrons is targeting our solar system. I mean, yeah, we spin around it and come into this beam every now and again, that's true. But it's still targeting the area of the solar system that we are. And at certain times, we are immersed more in this energy than others. And scientists working in laboratories deep under the Earth have discovered that the instruments are picking up these electrons because they're actually passing through solid rock because they're electrically charged. Whereas other rays, solar energies, dissipate under a few feet of rock. These won't. And that people who are very deep down in caves can actually see flashing almost behind their eyes. And this is actually the electrons coming from Cygnus. And so they went a bit further and discovered that they seem to be interfering with our DNA. And not only that, that when in periods of our history where these blooms have been intense, there was a kind of change in evolution. Things were invented. Mankind went through some kind of making leaps in civilization. So Andrew Carter and a lot of authors think that the star signal Cygnus was significant because the ancients knew that there was some kind of life force coming there that was helping us emerge into spiritual people. It's a theory, but there's a lot of information out there for you to Google.
What's his surname, sorry, Andrew?
Collins. Yeah, he's written a book called The Cygnus Mystery. And it was published in 2006, yeah. And it comes out of his research of ancient civilizations who orientated their stone circles, temples, like, for instance, Wayland Smithy, a long barrow, famous Neolithic long barrow in the Offington area, which is on our line, is orientated to the setting of Deneb, a major star in Cygnus. And that Avebury itself, two central circles, were orientated towards the rising of the star Deneb. And it goes on, and that a lot of the ancient cultures revered these particular stars because it's possible that they measured time, and they probably measured the meridians from these fixed stars, or it's possible they understood there was something more special about it. Speaking of places of the dead, the line also goes through the great, huge cemetery of Witton. And then this is the mail current, going on now to the King's Stanley man. This is actually the only prehistoric long barrow, or burial mound left in the Birmingham area. You'll find it easy on the map. Google King's Stanley man. It's in the middle of an island, if you like, major railway crossing. And then, of course, Barbeacon. So I'm standing on the edge of Scott Plantation here, looking towards the monument. Just inside the fence, inside the plantation itself, is the secret node. Nothing there marked, just a power place where these two currents are meeting. It's as if it was a forgotten sacred place. And here you see, this is the top of Barbeacon, looking down from above. Here, this is Scott Plantation, and the node point is there. This is where you park your cars on top of Barbeacon. So I thought, what is this? Why are the currents coming to node on this particular hill? And of course, when I found a geologist site about Barbeacon was on two fault lines, the Triassic Carboniferous fault line, which basically is sandstone and limestone. So that creates a lot of energy, the rubbing of crystal against crystal. And just where the Barbeacon fault cuts through that fault is almost the node point on top of Barbeacon. So the later research of the geology, it sort of fitted perfectly what we found where the node point was. The node point is sinking into the ground to draw from two fault lines. And those fault lines produce power, which Paul Devereux discovered while he was measuring, monitoring the long-life stones back in the 80s called the Dragon Project. He discovered that certain times of the year, certain times of the day, particularly at sunrise and sunset, a huge force of magnetism just came out of the ground in the area of the stone circle. And he discovered that magnetism was coming from a fault line nearby. And somehow, with the passage of the moon across the sky and certain solar flares of energy, the Earth moves subtly, and that friction, where there's a crack like these faults, creates magnetism. And depending on the degree of magnetism, it can cause all kinds of strange phenomena, including time slips. On the Isle of Wight, there's two places in different decades, but where people have actually been driving along, pulled into a pub, actually went in, actually drank a pint, he exchanged money, came out of the pub, went home. The next day they drove past it, it wasn't there. Even weirder was when they did the research that there was never a pub there. But even in Victorian times, one before, there was a pub there yesterday, it was gone the next day. A decade ago, the same thing happened on a different side of the island. Of course, at that particular time, the full moon was high. These pubs were actually positioned right on these fault lines of the island. Same thing happened. The couple went into a pub. There's two people. There was a couple on the first instance, so it wasn't just one person. It was two people. But a different part of the island, they went in, had a drink, came out. But they both had the same opinion that it was weird. There was something weird about the pub. The people were dressed differently. Their manner was quite strange. They weren't very friendly towards them. But they all agree that there's something to do with a parallel world that exists in our, you know, like in this space and time. This feels like reality, and this is all there is. But if you turn off the magnetism, electrical fields in this room to a certain degree, we start to see other things appearing in our own space. This is what the Americans experimented with the Philadelphia experiment. You've probably heard about that, where they put these great electromagnetic generators on a ship and cranked them up until the ship completely disappeared. It went into a parallel world, and all kinds of strange phenomena happened there. If you buy the DVD now called the Philadelphia experiment, and see what happens when you mess about with electromagnetism. So, on places like the Isle of Wight, the Barbeacon, this occur naturally at certain times because of the faults. And then I discovered Barbeacon, there's been lots of UFO sightings, strange lights occurring, ghosts, even druids walking across the hill. Phantom horses and headless coachmen, you know it, it's been reported that even with black cats is another sign of these.
Dogs too. Dogs too.
Sorry, dogs, black dogs, definitely black dogs. Black dogs always seem to occur, black dog sightings around these fault lines. We found that even, you know, sometimes you go past a pub called Black Dog, and often that's because of the sighting of a black dog. And often these black dogs are not just ordinary dogs, they're big, they're huge, they're like the size of a Shetland pony. And they've always got glowing bright eyes, and they're always trying to ward people off going along a certain path. You know, these things have happened all over the country, in Scotland, Wales, Ireland. These mysterious creatures have always been seen. And they seem to disappear, like a lot of the pumas sightings in Dorset that we've had, where some people have actually seen this creature actually disappear from their very eyes. So there's something otherworldly that goes on in certain areas, and we call them window areas. And Cannock Chase is one such area, and Barbeacon. You may have heard, or if you even Google the mysteries of the Cannock Chase, you'll come across Yeti-like creatures, all kinds of strange phenomena, UFOs, all kinds. So it's a fascinating area. I believe it's to do with geology. So there we have, we're going to look at a little bit what happens to the currents coming back to Birmingham. So we've got a place called Three Maypoles, which is nothing much of this history now apart from the names. Very mounds of prehistoric forts, not far from here actually. You can actually walk to Bury Mount from here. Surrey Hall Mill, where Tolkien used to play as a child, Moseley Park, of course, Moseley. And Edgbaston, of course, one of the great sort of parishes, old parishes, one of the oldest churches in Birmingham. Bury Mount Fort is a fascinating place. It's still got half a moat around it. And it was here that King Alfred fought a battle against the Danes. Interestingly enough, King Alfred fought several major battles to win the crown of King of England. And the other battle he fought was right on our line near Uffington, just within spitting distance of the dragon. Alfred defeated the Danes. And here, right on the spine of Albion, Alfred also defeated the Danes at Bury Mount. So this is a little bit of an important historic site in Birmingham. Bury Mount is
Just up the road.
just up the road. Darrell, you know where it is, isn't it? Have you not been there yet? But if you Google it, yeah, it's near Cheswick Green. And it's in between Cheswick Green and here. So yeah, if you go on Google that or even Google Berry Mound, make sure it's Berry Mound because there's loads of berry places in Birmingham. Berry Hillfort. So if you put Cheswick Green Berry Mound, you'll get directions. You'll find it with you. You can visit the site. One part of the site, that's certainly that part I'm showing you here. You can visit. And I think you can go on to part of the mound itself. And a lot of people say it's quite an impressive site, and it's still got a lot of energy. Of course, we found the mail current still connected with this line, with this site. Usually, we found a lot of battle sites that connected with the mail current. And this is one such place. St Bartholomew's Church, Edgbashing, was interesting because it was a perfect site for the mail current. It's on a high hill. It had a great tower. It's full of dragons, green men. It's a fascinating church. You can visit this church on Sundays.
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, you go and you done it.
Yeah. So this is a good place. You want to connect with the spine well and the dragon energies. Just go into this church and have a douse if you dare. The line itself, I think passes diagonally through the church. I've got it in there. Mostly Bulk is also a fascinating place to the line. From Surrey Old Mill, we sort of crossed land to the left of the bridge, taking us through the estate and then across the box and towards Moseley itself, through Waken Green. And we discovered that Tolkien was sort of lived in that area around Wake Green. So it was interesting in connecting because later on we discovered that the line connects with Stonyhurst in the north, where Tolkien went to school there. An interesting school there, Stonyhurst, because it's a Jesuit school. And only certain people of high standing were sort of educated at Stonyhurst, doing the Jesuits. And they're very high, almost Masonic religious order. And he wants to Google that sort of stuff and find some intrigue there. And mostly it's fascinating because of its mysterious events that go on there. I've been reading. But apparently it rained frogs and fishes at one time. And it all happens at Moseley, apparently.
It also happens in small deeds as well.
Oh yeah, you've had frogs and...
Bob Rickard, who founded the 14 Times, which you're probably familiar with, lived in Moseley in the early 70s for about 5 or 6 years. And first forerunner of the 14 Times, a little magazine about that big, and he did a tremendous amount of research on it, So...
Yeah, I mean, we don't know enough about this because we were just following the lines through. But we certainly, we did read some of that information. But it went actually, the current passed through the church at St Mary in Moseley, which had green nails as well. And it was one of the oldest churches in Birmingham, dates from Norman times. But it then also passes through we followed it through the back of the shops. We came out through the, what's the name of the shop? Zen bookshop.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I thought about this and thought, we're scratching our heads and thought, well, how did this happen? Did the people who run the shop actually, decide that this was the spot, or was it all just divine coincidence?
Male and female.
The female engine. So the lunar energy going through his Zen bookshop.
That's the one called Sylvia Chandler that lives in Moseley. It's been there since the 70s, I think, late 70s,
Yeah,
25 years now.
Yeah. And it also sort of, it also clips the pub next door, or next door, the one down to the Fighting Cops. And that had something to do with you before.
No, that was down the road, that was the new inn.
Is that the new inn?
There is a development to this Tolkien and J.R. Tolkien to do with Lord of the Rings. Because in the film, there's talk of the battle for Middle-earth.
Yes.
And Birmingham
Yes.
is the battle for Middle-earth.
That's right.
Whatever is supposed to be going on.
These themes seem to occur to us as we've gone along the lines. There's an undercurrent theme, you know, to do with the connection with the land and the power of the land. And yeah, I know with the Tolkien thing was interesting because the power of one of the twin towers, was it Edgbaston Tower and the Ring Tower, influenced his idea of the two towers.
He also lived in a place called Prospect Road when he was very small, which is in Moseley. It's on the Moseley King's Heath border.
Sarah is the home of the Hobbit.
Yeah, that's
Two
right.
towers is when you go to Edgbaston.
Yeah. But we also came across Tolkien's home at Shrubborough, because he lived with his wife. Was it 100? Next to Shrubborough Hall is a little village, and Tolkien lived there for a while. And I think he wrote Silmarillion, wasn't there? But and that was right on, this village is right on the alignment. So, and of course further up where he went to school at Stonehurst, that was almost on the alignment. So it's intriguing that Tolkien was connected with the spine of the ancient spine, the old roots of this country. And it figures, doesn't it? I mean, how many people are inspired by the Lord of the Rings and that, the hidden meanings of it. Because Tolkien understood all the old proses, the Norse writings. He was very much an historian of the old languages. So a lot of what I call allegories went into his work.
Did you have anything on Cannon Hill Park down that way of Edgbaston?
Cannon Hill Park?
Yeah, down that way of Edgbaston.
Yeah, it goes through Cannon Hill Park, doesn't it? No? I'm not sure. I'll have to get the map out.
What about Moseley Private Park?
Hmm?
You go anywhere near that?
Mostly.
Private Park, which is in Moseley.
You might do, if you're going from the church and then through Zen and then down towards Canada after.
Oh yeah, that's at the back of back of those buildings, yeah.
Yes,
it does.
between mostly
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it does.
None of us are allowed to use it.
Yeah. That's right, it's been a while since I've been through Birmingham, so I can't remember any bit of detail of it. But yeah, that's right. Because Darrell companies here, we sort of did a certain section. We also went through your old school, didn't we? Moses School, where yeah.
Now, block of flats.
Yes.
Yeah, now block flats. But wasn't you, you were talking meditation about it?
Yes, very unusual teachers. Taught to dream and have wonderful ideas. And I think we all went off and did amazing things and still are, hopefully. It's a wonderful old school.
So one of the interesting things the alignment connects with, that goes through Birmingham, is that it touches the Birmingham City grounds, football ground, as well as touches the Aston Villa football ground. So both football grounds are connected with the spine of Albion. So how synchronistic is that?
They are temples.
Well, yeah, and also gathering places a lot of people. I mean, whether it be, violent or good, it doesn't really matter to it. Energy will accept any kind of energy. And that's why these lines can be manipulated.
So do you think the line was there before the ground was built or came to it after?
Oh, absolutely, because we found a lot of historical and prehistoric sites on this line as well. So it seems like mankind are either being drawn to build something on that line, or they knew about the line we go to. Or that it works with our subconscious anyway, and that we're connected with it unknowing. So key places in the history along the spine of Albion, there was many of them, to do with the capitals, key places of kingship. As we found in Scotland, a lot of places where kings were crowned. So, but this is interesting, right next to Lymington, this park here, that's got this Fibonacci spiral. And it intrigued us. narrative, I couldn't find anything about it. So, what's it called? It's Kingston Hill Park. Anybody know this? Well, what's weird about it is that the whole park is laid out in a Fibonacci spiral, and in the middle of it is a stone circle.
It was where the zoos used to have a lot of fights, didn't they?
I can imagine coming out of the ground, all out scrapping.
Yeah, they didn't really get time to appreciate some subtler animals.
Yeah, that's right.
Is it male or female?
There's the actual alignment, the third force, if you like, the alignment to Earth is like in the early forms of the caduceus, they show that the line or the pole was the green pole, and the red and white, like the barber's pole, the serpent's going up then. Or to Earth, it's the yellow and violet colour, the serpent. But if you think about it, the pole, the line has to be important, because if it wasn't there, it would be no serpent line. There would be nowhere for them to follow. So the line is important. What Hamish and Paul, who wrote the Son of Serpent, failed to look at is the importance of the line too. Of course, the line through Birmingham also has these interesting places, even though they're football grounds. But this place fascinates me. Who was inspired to create a Fibonacci spiral in stone circle? And it still is a bit of a mystery. There is an architect responsible, but I know nothing about. I think it was a female, I think. Maybe you could find out. So, we live in Dorset, so we're a bit too far to do the research. But we just let people know, just inform them of what we discovered, and let people want to take it on the grave. So, looking at the bigger picture, we looked at where the line goes after the UK. It passes through on the outskirts of Bale, where the tapestry was produced. There's an ancient cathedral there that is sort of drawing the currents. Further down to Fontevraud. Now this is absolutely fascinating, because the Google line itself goes right through Fontevraud Abbey. So what's important about Fontevraud Abbey? Well, Henry II of England is buried in there, along with King John's wife, Richard the Lionheart, and Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was important because she was kept captive on the Isle of Wight at Hoare Abbey, right on the feminine code. One of the first things we discovered when we started this journey was the connection with Eleanor of Aquitaine, because she also lived in Winchester Castle with Henry II, and they had the Royal Palace there. She also lived in the palace and castle at Carlisle. So we found lots of connections with her throughout Britain. And now we found that her burial place is on the line, along with Henry II, who fortified Winchester and turned it into a great city, fortified Carlisle and turned it into a great city, and had other connections too along with certain places. But more to do with the Angevin bloodline. The Angevin blood, Fontevraud is the Angevin religious centre. The Angevins were a branch of the Normans, if you like. But then if you look into history and you find out who the Normans were, you're scratching your heads again, because they weren't French. If they were, we'd all be speaking French now. They were a Norse race, but where they actually came from is still a mystery. So the Angevins somehow were a very powerful race. And remember, it was the Angevins that eventually got the money together to produce the Crusades and actually invaded the Holy Land and took back Jerusalem and crowned their own king of the Holy Land. He was an Angevin king. So the Angevins were an important lot. And again, we get a Holy Blood, Holy Grail kind of story going on here. But Eleanor of Aquitaine, she was the first one to bring the Grail romances into Britain. She sponsored a lot of the great writers. And she was inspired by the troubadours, who she invited to her palace. And her main palace was at Poitiers, right on the line further down. So the tales of the Grail came to her at Poitiers. This is written by many authors, brought into Britain by her through English writers that she sponsored. So a lot of the Arthurian romances, which the Pre-Raphaelites picked up on, came from there. So that's another section that we've written a bit about. The line also passes very close to the south of France, so not that far from Carcassonne. And through the little tiny country of Andorra, which is probably someplace where the whale is, past Montserrat, clipped to Mallorca through an island called St. Dragonera, which means Island of the Dragon. And that's where it leaves the European sort of coastline. So, and further up north, it heads right to the main island of Faroe Islands, which is like the Nordic Avalon. So there's lots of scope, and it goes around the world across Greenland, through New Zealand, which is another interesting story. But yeah, that's it, that's our journey, and we're continuing. What we have found by connecting with these lines, that when we've actually gone to places where the line has been sort of shrunk, as if deliberately the energy is low, by putting our love and intention and good thoughts into the line, it's actually expanded. And we found that we have a powerful effect on the land when you actually work with these node points. Unfortunately, in the past, a lot of families like the Angevins have owned and built castles on these node points to control them. And but I found now that if you actually go through these node points and put your good thoughts into them, or positive thoughts, spread your love into them, whatever, it actually has a powerful effect on that area, the whole area. In fact, the work of the Fountain Group, network groups that run through the country and meet, their job is to try and cure bad neighbourhoods. Areas where there's been a lot of violence, a lot of problems in the past, they found by working at certain places of power, like natural places like I found it, like the Hill Force, obelisk, or certain features in the town that have a history, like I don't know, there's places in Birmingham like St. Chad's, or if it didn't have to be a church, it could be a jacuzzi. It could be anywhere used as a focal point to spread and visualise a beacon of energy, a light going across the area. And the human mind is so powerful, we actually create with what we think. So if we channel our thoughts into doing good to our community, using the power of the land, like we discovered, you can do incredible things. And we found that, that after walking this line, connecting with the land, we've actually, things have changed. I mean, we're not miracle workers. It takes a lot of people to do this. We all have to learn to reconnect with the land, because I think we have actually been divorced from it through modern society. And so, when you actually go back and walk these old paths again, something changes. Like, we've met so many people who have walked these lines, and it's changed our whole lives. We don't know why. Sometimes we think it's amazing, but it is. It really has changed our lives. And it's because they're reconnected with that energy that is in the land, that's connected to us, the kind of part of us that we've lost. So that's the end of my talk. So I just want to say thank you for listening. And it's been great talking to people from Birmingham again.
But we've got 5 minutes if anyone had an erudite question.
So if the truth juicers gathered at Barbeacon on that node point, put the energy in, do you think there's room? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
That's true.
Because Barbeacon's a good focus, actually, because it has the sort of the legends and the power in the land. It has everything about that place to be a beacon. Not just a beacon for fire, but a beacon for positive change, positivity. Absolutely.
At the northern point of Scotland, where it passes sort of, it goes over further forward.
Yes.
It goes on. Does it pass through Aberdeen?
No.
It doesn't.
No. it goes up the middle through Dunkeld, up the old pass towards Inverness.
Does it go to, what's the word? Oh, it's up there.
Schoon.
Yeah.
Schoon. Yeah.
Is that the place where there's a rumour that the relics of Christ have been buried?
Yes,
If
that's
anyone else is
right.
from
Yeah.
that sort of right, yeah. So that drop off to the lake, like.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. It's on the actual dragon lines, but not the actual line itself. Because the dragon lines actually weave around the main axis, if you like. So although the Perth schoon is not on the axis, it's actually the dragon lines also moved away from it and crossed right on the root hill, where the British king was crowned on the Stone of Destiny. But that Stone of Destiny, that's another story. It's a huge story.
Does it go anywhere near the Rosling Chapel?
It goes through the Pentland Hills across a place called Castle Moor, which was the Pictish place of kingship in early times. Rosling Chapel is about 5 miles.
Yeah,
from
further
us.
south until the east.
Not far.
How far away from the line now?
One question over here.
I was just going to ask, do you think there's, like you've got the St Michael's line, do you think there's these other cross lines going through the country as well? You know, you've got the St Michael's
Yes.
line that goes, and you've got your
Yes.
line. I'm just thinking, because like, there's other sacred stuff, and I'm just thinking, I've really drawn to this Arbor Low.
Yeah.
That's the Great Isosceles Triangle.
Yes.
That's what it's called, the Great Isosceles Triangle.
Well, I know they call it the Stonehenge and the North,
Yes.
or it's more like an aviary though, like a smaller version of aviary. And I'm just wondering whether, because your line doesn't it doesn't go near that, because it's in the Peak District, isn't it? And I'm just wondering whether, because we've got like a line, St Michael's line that go out, and whether there's these other lines that are possibly going around the...
Yeah, if you think about the human body, it has major arteries and veins running through it. The veins that run off the venous line, the Michael line, all connect with these other places in kind of a network. And Arbor Low is one of those places, but the spine of Britain, this line is following more to do with the physical, like the Beacon Hills are very important along the spine. The places like Arbor Low are man-made, then they're actually physically made by man, but the actual sacred hills are natural and more powerful. The places like Arbor Low are built to channel that energy from the surrounding landscape into a kind of temple and create an atmosphere. But the actual, the spine, and the same with the Michael line and all the great Michael hills, they are the real places of power. And places like Avebury were only built to tap into that power that comes from the natural places. So, because there's so many people who are into man-made places, but the natural places are real places.
It's just that I didn't know about this Arbor Low, and I just noticed that, you know, because a lot of people don't know about all these other sites that have, I mean, Avebury and Stonehenge are very famous. There's so many all over there's loads, isn't there?
Well, we discovered
about that connection, you see, between your line and the...
You'll find it is connected.
Sorry?
You'll find it is connected.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful book written by a guy called Paul Screeton called Quicksilver Heritage.
Yeah, I recommend that.
Well worth reading. And it deals with loads of stuff, including Arbor Low.
He's one of the most eloquent and grounded people I know who's written on the subject. He was president of the British Society of Garage as well.
That's right.
His book is way ahead of his time. I could read it now and it relates to what we're doing.
We've referenced it in there.
Oh, right.
Yes, you're
Right.
right.
Somebody over here would ask a question.
Yes. Are we sitting on the line here today, or
I'm very close.
Very good.
Yeah, very close. We were looking at that because we didn't know where this place was. When we looked at the map, we realised how close it is to the current from Birmingham.
Well, I really admire the stuff you've been talking about, Brom, because you mentioned Paul Devereux. Now, when Paul Devereux had a look at Warwickshire, out of all the counties in England, that was the one that was a no-go zone. They just didn't hang together. Ley lines don't hang together. in the Midlands at all. Yeah. So what you're doing is quite interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, of course, this is more than just a ley line. It's
Yes,
approved.
I know.
It's more than kind of
Sacred alignments.
and maybe an ancient thoroughfare.
Yeah.
Like a through route.
Yeah. But it was the only one he couldn't do. If you look at
That's interesting.
the Lay Hunter's Companion, yeah, in the introduction, yeah, it's the only one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you were saying about moving, centres around like sort of Victoria Square from St Martin's, because the Birmingham Council have a plan to build a square by St Martin's called Moat Square, referencing the old moat, and they plan to have some water there as well. So I don't know why they're doing that.
It's interesting.
But they are referencing that history, but they're also trying to kill and sanitize the marketplace whilst doing this. So interesting what they're doing.
I'll just go to the gentleman here.
Well, I'd just like to thank you, especially what you were bringing at the end, about how much actually the earth needs us.
Yes.
And I'm working with Ripstein's Calendar of the Soul, 52 verses. This week is the third from Easter. It's the threshold week from autumn to winter. And these threshold weeks speak of verses that speak of death or threatening. And really, it's implicit how much the world needs us. It says, so I begin to feel the world, which left without my soul's communion, just frosty empty life, unable to recreate in soul itself, could in itself alone find only death. And next week it says, it's about this power which then, if this real connection is made, is given to us. And it says, next week, mysteriously, to feel with newly risen sense of who I am, old treasure quickening within this inmost presence, shall waking all world forces to the work I offer life, and bring a tide of creativity that will imprint me into that which is.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm going to try and think of a brilliantly witty way to end this.
One more question over there.
This is a PS.
Church, I've got loads of questions, but I'm going to start to one, you know the village you were talking about, where it kind of passes through a wall where Tolkien's Birtcliff. Is it Christ like that all the way up? That's what I'm asking. You know when it goes through the Birtcliff, as it goes through the Birtcliff, did you go anywhere near the place called Woodlands Camp? Round Hill, called Christ and Wood? No. Okay, thank you.
Well, one of the things to think of, as I said, we had a guy called John Boyd talking about vortexes measuring energy in a certain 3D motion. So this, sometimes people think waves do this, and they don't, they do this. So everything is a circular motion. So when the guys are picking up moves and turns, the circles are in 2D and a 3D plane. So it's not always like flip, it's more like this. It's much more encompassing. That's magnetic more, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. So it's not, 2D waves are not descriptive of a wave. A wave is a circular spiral of constant creativity.
But man creates straight lines, but nature creates curves.
Yeah, I think there is a straight line, which is the central current or flow or whatever. Yes. But around that then is the magnetic energy which creates the ionised air, which creates the crystals which vibrate a certain harmonic that makes your foot.
So is it a linear, it's a straight line?
Well, the Aborigines and American Indians say that souls travel in straight lines to the next.
It's not, it's the female and the male line doing this all the time.
No, I've just said there's a central current, and around that central current is a vortex of spiraling energy.
So some say a straight line is a spirit path.
Right. Okay, so these two currents you follow the soul path around it. So
Yes, it's like terrestrial currents around the spirit path. Or, you know, I think it's more akin to DNA in some way, because of the messages it brings.
We're all going to do tales of the unexpected. I think it's been a beautiful evening. I really appreciate you